Hi, this is Ragzog, and this is the Warlock section of Arena Pwnage. And today I'm going to be talking about a few things. The first thing I'm going to be covering today is Warlock damage rotations in arenas, when to use what curses, talk about a little bit damage breakdown. I'm going to open a recount for you so you can kind of see kind of what does what, and then lastly I'm going to talk about your three direct damage abilities: Shadow Bolt, Searing Pain, and Drain Life, and I'm going to go over when to use each of those spells and which situation calls for Drain Life or Shadow Bolt. And then lastly, I'm going to look a little bit on how to gear your Warlock, and I'm just going to go through a few simple rules how to gear your Warlock properly. So yeah, here we go. So first, we're gonna take a look at Warlock damage and what abilities to use when and where. So I've been running a recount for you. This is a recount that I built up over a few battlegrounds and a few arenas, just so you can see kind of my damage spread. Um, the big thing here is look how much damage corruption does, and corruption damage is this giant red slice. And in an arena setting, PvP setting, a vast majority of your damage will be from corruption. Corruption can crit. It's your hardest hitting dot. Can get up to 4k crits on zero resilience targets, depending on your gear. So it's very important ability to have, and to make sure you're always spreading it on targets. So like when I zone into arena, one of the first things I always do is start putting up my corruption on targets. The other part about corruption that is so nice is this talent here, Siphon Life. And you might not notice it healing you, but the Siphon Life heal is absolutely huge. So if you have 3 or 4 people corruption in an arena, I mean, it's healing you, it's not affected by MS, and it really gives you an increase in survivability. You might not notice it, but it's definitely helping you. The next part is your Curse of Agony. It's an easy dot to get off, but at the same time it does very small damage. You can see it here ticking on my screen for 475, and I have some of the best gear right now in the game. Meanwhile, Corruption is ticking for 3 times as much. Now the thing about Curse of Agony too is you don't always want to use it on your focus fire target, because a lot of the times Curse of Elements is going to be a better curse, because most classes these days, for whatever reason, do magic damage. Rogues now and Venom rogues, their Envenom is magic, so if you're running with a rogue, Curse of Elements is going to be better on your focus fire. Same thing with hunters. Hunters, their Chimera shot and their Arcane shot, both magic damage, so once again you're going to want to be using Curse of Elements on your focus fire target, not Curse of Agony. At the same time, you still are going to want Agony on people you aren't attacking, because you still want to start spreading your dots, creating pressure on them, because obviously your partner won't be attacking them. The only time that Curse of Elements won't be used is, if you're not running with a caster, you're not running with a hunter or rogue, so that pretty much leaves you with DKs that have Ebon Plague to begin with, so that overlaps your Curse of Elements, and pretty much a warrior. Pretty much these days, I mean, almost always going to be using Curse of Elements. Maybe a red paladin, you wouldn't need elements, but besides that, elements is pretty much the curse to go to on your focus fire target. So this next slice of pie here is this blue slice. It's your UA, and you're always going to be wanting to put up UA on targets probably as soon as you can, as after your corruption is up and your curse of agony or elements on your focus fire target, just to protect your dots and protect your crowd control effects. Now, sometimes you don't want to put up UA first. You're going to want to cast Haunt, and the way you decide if you use UA or Haunt first is if the team has a defensive dispel. If not, chances are it's going to be more beneficial to put up Haunt first than it's going to be putting up UA. But if they do have a defensive dispel, always stick with UA first, because getting your stuff dispelled, especially your corruption and your crowd control abilities, can be extremely devastating. So this next part of the pie is the Drain Soul Execute, and whenever you're in a PvP setting, you're going for the kill. The Drain Soul Execute is awesome. You want to use that always when a person gets below 25% HP, mainly. I mean, it ticks from anywhere from 8 to 9k. Huge damage. Even if they get healed back up, it'll still be ticking for that huge amount of damage. So always going to want to use that when you're trying to eventually go for the kill. The next little slice of pie is going to become my direct damage ability. So this pink slice is Haunt, and then this aquamarine is going to be Shadow Bolt, Searing Pain, so on and so forth. So what I want you to notice is how little my nukes make up my overall damage. My direct damage abilities make up for just a small portion of a Warlock's damage, not even a quarter of the pie. Maybe more like, it looks like about an eighth. So only an eighth of my damage comes from actual nukes and direct damage dealing abilities. So in an arena setting, you want to always keep that in mind, that it's your dots that are dealing damage most of the time, not your nukes. So the next part is, what nukes do you use? Do you use Shadow Bolt? Do you use Searing Pain? Or do you use Drain Life? So the first thing is, which one does the most damage? Shadow Bolt always does the most damage, followed by Searing Pain, and then followed by Drain Life. But the problem is even though Shadow Bolt does the most damage, it's by far the easiest to interrupt. It's a very long cast, a 3-second cast without talents. It's on your shadow tree, so if you get locked out on it, you won't be able to cast the next 90. Another 90% of your abilities will be completely useless for that time if you get locked out. And it's very easy to LOS. Since it has such a long cast time, it's very easy to interrupt. So most of the time you will not be hard casting Shadow Bolts. The next ability, of course, is your Searing Pain ability. And Searing Pain is kind of the most popular Warlock nuke because it's on the fire tree. So if you get locked out on it, it won't even affect you, because you'll get to cast your fears and your dots, your death coils and all that, and you won't even have to worry about getting counterspelled. At the same time, it does a decent amount of damage per second, so it still hits quite hard. And it's a quick cast, so you can get them off quickly. So it's an overall very nice ability. Now the last and by far the most situational and debatable is your Drain Life. Now Drain Life hands down does the least amount of damage of all your spells, and the way to even make Drain Life almost even worth using as a nuke is getting the talent Soul Siphon that I've scrolled over here for you. Without even Soul Siphon, I would not even consider using Drain Life. Now, you don't have to take Soul Siphon as a talent as a Warlock. It's purely preference. I personally like to take it, though. Now, Drain Life is good in the fact that, it can follow people behind LOS. So if they LOS you, you can still be hitting them with your Drain Life. It heals you, and it's not affected by MS. But once again, the downside is it is on your shadow tree. It does the least amount of damage. Now the other good things about Drain Life too is it does refresh your corruption on the target. So if you don't want to put up another corruption and waste that GCD and you just want to squeeze out a little bit more damage, it's going to be better to put up Drain Life. And then lastly, of course, Drain Life can proc Nightfall, can proc instant cast Shadow Bolts. But generally, I don't think that's a good reason to cast Drain Life, because even though you have the potential of doing more damage, it's very RNG, and I'm not big on casting things for RNG. It's like a dice roll. I'd rather have nice, consistent damage that I can count on personally, so I have a good feel of what I'm going to be able to do. Besides that, the only other damage dealing abilities Warlock has in its arsenal is the Shadow Flame. And Shadow Flame is pretty much garbage and not even worth the GCD 99% of the time, just because it's so completely garbage. The damage is so low, dots ticks for less than Curse of Agony, it hits for nothing. But the good part about it is if you glyph it, it is amazing glyph. That snare is absolutely incredible. If you're going to run any 2 vs 2 as a Warlock, you have to have Shadow Flame glyph for at least the 2 vs 2 bracket, because it's just so good. And then the only other damage dealing is Soulfire, and as if you're Affliction, you won't even be using Soulfire, so you can even take that off your bar. So those are